buy an old Porsche, they said. It'd be fun. Well, it wouldn't come without its expense, surely, and my Cayman S has been no exception. And in this video, I'm going to tell you all about it, how much it's cost me over the last 12 months. I think a few of you will be a little surprised. The issue with owning one of these cars is that they're extremely old, and a 15-year-old car is always going to cost you a ton of money. And the Cayman S was always going to be one of those cars, a 15-year-old Porsche. It was never going to be cheap. Cold start with my new exhaust. I say new, it's been on the car pretty much 12 months now, which is why I thought I would do this video, talk to you about how much it's cost me, because I have had a few modifications. Regular viewers will know which of those things that I've had done, and some would argue they are a little bit pointless, but for me it's all part of Porsche ownership, and modifications are just one of those little things. So first, let's just talk about mileage. Mileage is a big part of how much these cars cost to run, and I appreciate a lot of people watching this channel will not do the miles. It will probably be used as a weekend toy or something like that, special occasion, dry weather car. For me, it's not about that. For me, this car was all about taking it on epic adventures, and this year has been the start of what I would consider to be the future of this channel. Long road trips across Europe, around the UK, England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, everywhere. I plan to get this car on a container and ship it off to some really bizarre places going forward. So yeah, this car is all about piling the miles on. This year is just the beginning, and I managed to do 8,000 miles in this car. During its time, I've done about 40,000 miles in the car. It's quite a lot, and it gives me a good idea of what it's like to run this as a daily driver. There are a couple of fixed costs which I have included in this total because, well, in the UK we get taxed quite a lot. Road tax is going up, they're talking about putting it up further, and that's just one of the fixed costs you can't really get rid of. If anything, it's just going to keep going up, pricing these sort of cars out of the market. And at the moment, the cost of that is over £700 for the year. So before you've even started, you need to budget about £700 just to tax this car. That's because it's a 2006 Cayman S, which puts it in the highest tax bracket in the UK. If you get the slightly newer one or the smaller engine car, you will avoid that. So that is worth bearing in mind. Although they won't be cheap, it certainly won't be £700. The other thing in the UK, which is really expensive at the moment, is insurance. When I first bought this car, my insurance was, well, it was cheap, to put it mildly. It was very, very cheap. Now, prices have, of course, increased, and my insurance used to only be around £350. Everyone's circumstances are different. I live in quite a safe area, low crime rate, and I'm old, so it used to be about £350. It's now £650, so that's nearly doubled, thanks to our rapidly increasing cost of living in the UK. But yeah, that's another cost that is unavoidable. You've got to pay those two things to even keep this thing on the road. So yeah, we'll pull over and I'll get into the nitty-gritty, the bits that really matter, the things that ultimately will be whether you buy one of these cars or don't, because although they're cheap to buy, they're anything but cheap to run. Let's get into how much this car's cost me for the full year. A full breakdown of everything that I've spent on the car in the last 12 months. There is a little bit more to come before this year is out, but I've gone back a little bit into last year to make it a full 12-month period to give you an idea on the cost. So I started the year probably quite expensively, probably more than I should have. Bearing in mind how unreliable this car has been and that it's had a full engine rebuild, the car didn't really need things spending on it that weren't necessary. However, I do believe that it is a necessary modification if you're going to do one, and that's the exhaust. This car has a full Top Gear stainless steel valved exhaust system fitted to the car. The cost of that was £934 with £200 of fitting. Yeah, quite a lot of money, but I think now I've driven around with it for the past year or so, I've got used to it, and honestly, I wouldn't go back. I wouldn't change it. It was money well spent, and it sounds absolutely phenomenal. It's allowed me to enjoy the car even more than I ever thought possible. So yes, it's a modification, but it's something that I think if you've got one of these cars, you need to consider. So it's probably something to budget for, because they don't sound great as standard. Next up was its brakes. This is something I'd not done on the car since I bought it. I've had the car 3 years and never touched the brakes. So this was always going to be an expense that was going to come up. I fitted genuine discs, or did I? Genuine discs and Brembo pads. The cost of that fitted was £810, my local independent. Not too bad, but again, it's quite a big bill, especially when you consider this car only cost 14 grand. It's quite a lot of money, and it would have been a lot less if it was on, say, something like an Audi S3. Before I went to the Nürburgring, I wanted to make sure the car was handling right, so I took it to Joey's Speed Shop, where I got the tracking done and the full geometry set up. That was, again, a cost that wasn't really 100% necessary, but it's something I wanted to do. It did transform the car, in fairness. So that cost me £225. Then I was keen to make sure the car was not only handling right, but it was also running correctly. This car's had a lot of work done to it over the years. The engine has been out, it's been serviced, it's been driven a lot of miles, and I wanted to make sure that the engine was running as it should be. And I was a bit curious to how much horsepower this thing had, because it feels quick, but I wanted to know how quick it was, so I put it on a rolling road. This rolling road was a hub dyno. You'll have seen the video. If you haven't, there's a link in the top of the screen now, and you can see the car on that dyno. It produced a woeful 225 horsepower at the wheels, which is a bit embarrassing. I thought it would have way more than that. It equates to about 280 at the crank, a little bit down on its power from factory, but again, it's not that bad. This car's 16, so it's not lost a ton of power, and it still performs, well, perfectly. I love it, and it's got plenty of power for what it is. Next up was the head unit. This is something I've been bothered by for years. Since owning the car, I've not been able to plug my music in. I've had to use one of these stupid FM transmitter things, which picks up truck drivers, it picks up interference like you would not believe. They're good for a bit, and after a while, it starts to get a bit annoying. So I replaced that for an AliExpress head unit. The video link will be at the top of the screen now. And yeah, that only cost 156 quid. I fitted it myself, no issues whatsoever. One of the best modifications you can do to these cars, and for the price, absolute bargain. Full Apple CarPlay, wireless Android Auto, it's got the lot. And it worked seamlessly across my 500-mile trip around the north of Scotland. So I'd highly recommend the AliExpress head unit as a modification to your Cayman. Next up, of course, was the service. Well, it's only had a major service the year before, so I went for a minor this year, which added to £200. Not a ton of money, just an oil change, filter change, real basic stuff, but it's something you need to be careful with these cars. Service schedule on these is once every 2 years. I can't remember what the mileage is, maybe 10,000 miles or 2 years, whichever comes first. Don't follow that, just change it all every year, because this is one of the contributing factors to bore score, is following the service plan, which is a bit mental, but yeah, make sure you get the car serviced every single year, and it should help prolong the engine and keep the car running sweet. Now, the last bill of the year was the biggest, most surprising, and it revealed a few faults with the car. Before I went to the North Coast 500, I wanted to make sure the car was leak-free, driving perfectly. Took it to Sam Lander's garage, and he found that when they did the geometry on the car, the camber bolt was loose, which is why The inside tyre was bald, which means I needed a new rear set of tyres. I needed full tracking done. The car only went in for a gearbox sump replacement, and it came out with a bill of £1,701. Now, they did complete a lot of work, and I'm not criticising the garage, but the car went in for a sump replacement, which was always going to be quite expensive. The bill came out over £1,000 more than what I expected. And that is what I would say about these cars. You go into a garage expecting a fairly small bill, or even just a medium-sized bill, and it comes out with a ginormous bill that you're not quite expecting. And although these cars are cheap to buy, this goes to show they're not very cheap to run at all. And it's the extra little bits that add up that really screw you over. Aside from the modifications and the general running costs, you have got things like insurance, road tax, and of course fuel. Now, to keep this as honest as possible on what it's like for me to daily this and run it and do all the road trips that I do, I have added up all of those things. Like I spoke about earlier, road tax has shot up in the UK. This is the top band that you can pay. Lesser models do pay a bit less, and newer ones again pay a little bit less, but this paid monthly adds up to £771 a year in road tax. And when you consider the state of our roads, it's beyond a joke that I'm having to pay this much. Like, that is colossal. That's 3 times more than your average car. It's insane. But anyway, you can't avoid it. If you want this car with this big engine, that's the price you've got to pay, unfortunately. Next up is insurance. Spoke about this, said how mine has doubled over the past year, £634. It's not exactly cheap. I'm 35, so I'm quite old, live in a good neighbourhood. It's still £634 a year. Before you've even started, it's a lot of money. Now, the mileage I've covered in this car over the year, 8,000 miles. When you work that out with about 22 miles to the gallon, which is what this pretty much sits at all of the time, and the price of fuel here in the UK at £1.45 a litre, works out about £2,400 a year in fuel. So I've added it all up. So the mods and maintenance bill, that comes to £4,352. That's maintenance, servicing, everything, and a few mods. £4,352. Road tax and insurance, £1,405. It's a lot of money just to keep this car on the road, basic amount. Which brings the total before fuel to £5,757. That's a ton of money. That's for mods, maintenance, and just running this car. Nearly £6,000. You could buy a new car every single year for that. It's insane, and I am shocked it's cost that much. Yeah, I've had a few things added to the car, but the exhaust, take that out of the equation, and you're still nearly £5,000. It's a lot of money. When you add in fuel and the mileage that I've done, it takes the grand total to £8,157, which works out £1 a mile. £1 a mile to drive this car. Every single mile I've done has cost me £1. And when you think of it like that, it's a lot of money. But is it worth it? So, the grand total for driving this car for a full year is over £8,000. But that does include your fuel. What do you think to that? Do you think that's a lot of money, or do you think it's a relative bargain when you consider what I've done with the car and how much enjoyment I've got out of it? People you get to meet while driving it. Porsche Owners Clubs. The Porsche Owners Club is one of the friendliest owners clubs I've ever come across. Everyone's down to earth, and I've met some lifelong friends through this. Not only that, but I've been able to build this entire YouTube channel on it and bring lots of hopefully entertaining videos to people with this car and share my experience with it. Is it me moaning about how much this car's cost me? Not at all. I don't care that it's cost me that much. I'm not a very wealthy man. That is a lot of money to me. But for the amount of joy and excitement I get from it, and the fun and adventures I get to go on, it's worth every single penny. No, these are not cheap cars to run, and you'd be very mistaken if you thought going out and buying one for about 15 to 20 grand and then being able to run it for a couple of grand a year was realistic. It's not. Yes, I've done modifications, but that's all part of owning an old car. It's only so long before using the head unit with its FM radio that you decide you need to upgrade. And it's only so long before doing full sends in the car that you realise you want it to sound a bit more like this. So you are going to do the modifications. It's guaranteed. So for me, it's just part of ownership of this car. But anyway, I just want to take this opportunity as well during this video to say thank you to everyone that has supported my channel over the last 3 years. This channel has become so much bigger than I ever imagined, and it's all thanks to you guys. My videos are doing really well, the channel's going from strength to strength, and I can see me hitting that magic 10,000 subscribers before this year's out at this rate. So yeah, thank you to everyone that has supported me. It means the world. And if you haven't already hit that subscribe button, then please consider doing so. It makes such a huge difference to my channel, and you'll be able to join me on what will be some really exciting adventures going forward. I've got so many plans with this car, and not just sharing its builds, but actually going out and enjoying it too. So if you are interested in seeing where I take my Porsche next, and also if you are interested in where it's been, then I suggest you hit that subscribe button, have a look through some of my videos. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this rather quick upload, this update video on my Porsche and how much it's cost me. Drop it in the comments below. What do you think? Has it cost more or less than you expected? For me, it's about right. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.